A video game story should be memorable all on its own, but sometimes its world can feel even more alive if it's filled with interesting NPCs, landmarks, and most of all, impactful side content that offers up a nice dessert to enjoy alongside the narrative main course. Okay, that analogy got away from me there, but you get the idea. Unfortunately though, it doesn't always turn out to be all that sweet, as sometimes these tasks can require repetitive grinds or boring checklists, and often both. The good thing about this tedium is that it's technically optional, but that doesn't make it feel any less like the developers want to make those people striving for 100% suffer for having the gall to enjoy their game in its entirety. We've taken a look at a handful of these monotonous quests previously, but there's seemingly a never-ending supply of busy work to do in the world of video games, so we've chosen a few more for you to waste your time with if you have nothing else on for the next few years. I'm Peter from TripleJump, and here are 10 more of the most tedious side quests in video gaming. Number 10. Pocket Circuit, the Yakuza series. The Yakuza series is inseparable from its side activities, and not all of them are going to land for everyone. With so many to choose from, I can already hear a sizable contingent of you yelling at us for picking this one, saying, "No, it's good actually," and "It's literally as easy as following a guide, stop complaining." However, isn't the need for a step-by-step guide just proof that Pocket Circuit is inherently tedious? If you're unfamiliar with the concept of this particular minigame, Pocket Circuit is an activity which sees big bad crime man Kiryu spending some of his free time racing tiny cars against both children and full-grown adults who take it far too seriously. As a one-off diversion, these races aren't all that bad, but attempting to progress through the ranks is a different story. This is because these races have parts that can be swapped and replaced, offering different stats and advantages. Often these can handily be bought from the venue's store, which isn't so bad, but the problem comes when they can't be, because now it's time to hunt down the location of this one specific bit for this one specific stat boost that will guarantee you the win for this one specific race. Even a real car wouldn't be this much work. Number 9. Cairn Stones, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. It feels like, in most cases, Assassin's Creed games get bigger every time, with Origins starting the trend and the next titles only scaling things up from there. The place where this is most intimidating, and let's be honest, off-putting, is Valhalla, which introduces a mind-boggling amount of side content before the player has even left the tutorial area. Now, while all of the various activities seem like serious time commitments, the one that's arguably the biggest pain for the least reward is tracking down and faffing about with the Cairn Stones. These collections of rocks are dotted throughout the map, and each one is its own special puzzle, requiring players to rotate and place each piece on top of the other until the stack is complete. One of the primary issues with that is that it's incredibly finicky, as even the slightest bit of unbalance can send the stones scattering like a Jenga tower, making the whole affair take 3 times longer than it needs to. This isn't helped by the fact that it takes some time for the objective to even register as complete, meaning that sometimes the stones will fall at the literal last second. Take it from me, no one needs to go through this amount of stress for one measly skill point. Number 8. Firewalker Missions, Mass Effect 2. Mass Effect 2 is generally considered to be the best of the trilogy, with a full roster of memorable characters and a tense, impactful story. What's perhaps less loved, however, is the bit of DLC that adds what are collectively known as the Firewalker missions. Now, these may sound exciting enough upon first glance, as some of them have bombastic names such as Geth Incursion and Volcano Station. Unfortunately, though, the names are really the only interesting thing about them, because this set of excursions consists of several vehicle-based affairs full of repetitive research collection and combat encounters, because we all loved driving the Mako around in the first game, right? It's true the Hammerhead instead has slightly better handling, barely, but this is only because it hovers and is therefore less likely to go pinballing off in any given direction when it hits a stray rock. It is, however, flimsier than a wet paper towel, which makes all of the combat an exercise in patience. The research collection isn't any better either, as players have to hover over a specific spot whilst making sure the hammerhead doesn't slide off, because apparently, just like its namesake, it will die if it stops moving. Worst of all, there's not even a decent reward, meaning this particular DLC is basically useless. Brilliant. Number 7. Dodging Lightning, Final Fantasy X. Final Fantasy games have always had a bit of a grind to them and often hide the best weapons behind elaborate side missions or obtuse sets of rules. Final Fantasy X stays true to this trend, featuring powerful celestial weapons for each of the characters, none of which are particularly easy to get. Lulu's demands something a little extra, however, in the form of dodging 200 lightning bolts. And this doesn't just mean 200 in total either, because that would be much easier and faster to do. Instead, it means you have to dodge 200 of these bolts in a row without leaving the Thunder Plains in order to collect the sigil for Lulu's celestial weapon. Granted, there are a lot of tips out there for how to make this one easier on yourself, such as where the most consistent and easy to dodge lightning will strike, but it's still down to the player to not get distracted or let themselves get thrown off the rhythm mid-grind. There's no on-screen counter either, and while the HD remaster did include a trophy for accomplishing the task, anyone who played the original had to just trust that they'd counted correctly. You really better hope that your dodging finger is up to the task for this one. Number 6. Moogle Mischief, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. While we're on the topic of Final Fantasy missions, what about that side content in Rebirth, eh? Sure, it's understandable that the second of the Final Fantasy VII reworded trilogy wanted to fill its open world with something to do now that it's all fancy and fresh, but the inclusion of Ubi World-style climbable towers and Chadley interrupting you every 2 bloody seconds to spout nonsense wasn't exactly the type of content fans were clamoring for. Yes, I heard you the first time, leave me alone. Perhaps one of the most universally despised activities is the series of Moogle minigames that can be found dotted across the map. Each of these tasks Cloud with hunting down a handful of the fluffy creatures and herding them into their pen, all while avoiding their many attacks. Not great perhaps, but surely not that bad, right? Well, that's where you're wrong, because the difficulty will escalate quickly if you choose to try all of these challenges, with more projectiles, more complicated arenas, and time limit restrictions. Also, more often than not, the Moogles will go the exact direction you don't want them to. It truly is like herding cats, but worse somehow. And your reward for all of this? Well, Cloud getting turned into a Moogle and a special plushie. Fully not worth it, if you ask us. Number 5. Seeking Your Roots, The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. In the 4th installment of the Elder Scrolls series, the world is threatened by massive Oblivion gates, which are, in theory, what the game is all about. The problem with that, though, is that they're not all that fun to deal with, so most of what gets accomplished by players is any of the other myriad available side quests. All, that is, except this one. At some point in the adventuring, players can run into an alchemist named Sindarian, who sends them off on the quest Seeking Your Roots. Rather than being about researching the character's family history though, it instead has the player track down a total of 100 Nirnroot to bring back to him so he can research the plant and provide some unique potions. Now thankfully, Nirnroot aren't too hard to locate as they're reliably found alongside bodies of water and emit a twinkly sound that can make tracking them down much easier. The problem though is just the sheer amount of time you have to spend plant picking, and all for a series of progressively better potions, in air quotes, that still aren't actually worth having when all's said and done. The easiest way to finish this quest though? Just kill Sindarian. I'm not saying that's the moral thing to do, but, the Dark Brotherhood questline is way more fun than this, so why not commit one murder here, and then go off to have a much better time with a whole career's worth of murders? Number 4. Figurines, The Legend of Zelda: Wind Waker. For someone who's always on a quest to save the world, Link sure does seem to have a lot of time on his hands in many of the Zelda games. Something you'd definitely think he wouldn't ever have time for, though, is figurine collecting. But here we are. This particular diversion shows up in Wind Waker, where Link can discover a secret figurine hideaway tucked away on its own special little island once he's made it to Forest Haven. It's not enough to just find this little hideaway, though, as in order for Karlov to actually craft his masterpieces, Link will need a picto box, but a special color version, not the basic one. Then you have to take perfect pictures of NPCs and enemies, some of which, primarily bosses, only show up once. Even more frustrating, the box can only hold 3 pictures at one time, and each of the 134 figures takes an in-game day to make. Now, it's true that all of this was streamlined a bit in the HD release, so it wasn't quite as bad there, but regardless, the only reward you get for collecting all of these figurines is another figurine. So, thanks, but no thanks, Karlov. Number 3. Duchesses and Other Animals, Red Dead Redemption 2. Rockstar may be a video game powerhouse, but they sure do like to include some sadistically tedious quests in their games. Take Red Dead Redemption 2 for example, which may be a beautiful cowboy sandbox, but also has you hunting for perfect pelts to give to a woman who's very into taxidermy, or in the case of Duchesses and Other Animals, gathering feathers, eggs, and petals from some of the game's rarest animals and plants. This is hard enough for the first list of items, but once Arthur returns with all of this rare loot in hand, quest giver Algernon Wasp sends him out to gather even more, but this time they're even rarer and more finicky to find. This continues until a total of 5 lists of increasingly hard to find items have been completed, and while sometimes there are only 3 or 5 required, Algernon wants 15 or even 20 of some others. This is particularly infuriating when it comes to the plants, because judging how rarely some of them seem to spawn for us, the RNG is very much not in the player's favour. Better make sure to pack some warm clothes, because you will be camping for a while. Number 2. Life in the Sands, Nier. It can be a real pain to start a seemingly straightforward side quest only to discover it has a bunch of moving parts, and Life in the Sands is just one such example. It starts when you speak to an NPC who will ask you to bring her 10 pink moonflower seeds. Sounds simple enough, but it's not nearly as easy as walking to the garden centre. No, these specific seeds have to be gathered from a plant that's only obtainable by crossbreeding it yourself, but whose crossbreed parents also have to have been manually crossbred. Not only that, but you also have to be careful not to harvest the plants too early, because the seeds will only drop when the plant withers, not if it's plucked beforehand. Now this is annoying all on its own, sure, but each plant you'll need takes 24 real-world hours to grow and another 24 real-world hours to wilt, so that you can then collect the seeds to plant more plants to wait more literal days until you have the 10 that you need. Assuming you don't cheat the clock, that is. Most insultingly though, even if you do stick with it to the very end, this is a late game quest, meaning the cash you get as a reward will likely be pocket change at this point, making the whole thing a true waste of time. And number 1, Spirit Collection, Ghostwire Tokyo. We've seen collectible quests pop up here and there across the course of this list, and while they all require a fair amount of time and effort, not one of them makes the process as massive an undertaking as Ghostwire Tokyo does. There are a number of different types of collectibles that can be found throughout the game, and all of them can take a while to track down, but by far the most egregious time waster is Spirit Collection. The biggest problem with this particular task is that there's a total of 243 1,300 spirits scattered throughout the various districts that have to be collected if players want to reach the coveted 100%. They do tend to float around as massive clumps of supernatural energy, so you at least don't have to hunt them down one by one over the course of the next 50 years of your life, but even with upgrades, there are generally only between 500 and 1,000 per amalgamation, and you only have space for so many at a time, meaning it will still take you a good long weekend to nab them all, and that's assuming you don't have anything else to do for 2 days, like see real people or eat food. God, who knew that saving the souls of an entire district would be such a hassle?